She says hi, you guys. She's my favorite thing in the world. Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. It's been a while since I filmed my last video, but the important thing is that I'm back. So I know you guys have been waiting for part 2 of the Ceraadi series for a little while now, and guess what? It's here. So in this part, I go into quite a bit of depth in regards to Znuie's relationship with Lil Jamez. And if you guys don't remember, Lil Jamez is the guy that she kind of went to see when her family thought that she was kidnapped, or claimed that they thought that she was kidnapped. And I know I addressed it pretty broadly in the last part, but I'm going to go into quite a bit of depth in this part and the next part. So I'm going to be splitting this Znuie and Jamez situation commentary into 2 parts, because if I don't, this video is going to be an hour long. And I think it might even be an hour long this time. I don't know, we'll find out. But before I get into it, I just wanted to thank you guys for all the love that you've shown my last part. You know, I didn't expect that at all. But yeah, I just wanted to thank you guys. And I also wanted to thank a few people who reached out to me after watching and actually provided me with really useful information that I could use for my next commentary, which is this commentary and like the ones to come. So thank you guys. Thank you very much. That was a big help. I did want to add a trigger warning at the beginning of this video. I'll be touching on topics such as depression, suicidal thoughts, and abuse. So if these themes bother you or trigger you in any way, I'd avoid watching this video. So without further ado, I'm gonna get straight into it. But before I do, I just wanted to remind you guys to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, turn on post notifications if you want to be notified of part 3 when it comes out, or any other videos that I post, and follow all my social media. They'll be linked down below. So I'm going to start this commentary off by giving you guys a little bit of context as to how all these events started, just as a reminder, and so that all these events that I address kind of tie together more seamlessly. So Znuie decided to go see Jamez in Vegas for a few days, but lied to her mom about where she was going because her mom didn't like Jamez and she didn't want Znuie hanging out with him. So instead, she told Sandra, the mom, that she was hanging out with her friend China for a few days. So from Znuie's latest video that she had posted on her channel addressing the situation, according to her, Jamez had no idea that she was going to come visit him.
But Jamez didn't know that I didn't tell her that I was in Vegas. So on my behalf, I was completely wrong about that.
But she felt like she didn't owe her family any explanation as to where she was going because she was 18 at the time and paying bills at her house.
I'm helping paying bills at this time, and so I'm thinking like I'm 18, I'm of age.
She said that Jamez had advised her to reach out to her family and to be honest with them about how she was feeling at home and the fact that, you know, the toxicity at home was affecting her and her willingness to be in the group. I think that's what triggered Sandra to blow up the situation. Now, I understand the mother being, you know, worried about her children, and that's why I think her contacting China at that point was justified. But don't get me wrong, that whole social media shenanigans, oh my god, I'm gonna get into that. Because that is... So when Sandra reached out to China and asked her where Znuie was, China was honest with her and said that she had no idea. And that eventually caused Znuie and China to, you know, fall out because Znuie felt like China threw her under the bus. But Sandra actually threatened to get the police involved. And of course, China didn't want to get in trouble, so she had to speak up. So this is where Znuie's family started posting a lot on social media about Znuie being kidnapped, and even took to Instagram Live to talk about her being kidnapped, I guess. I spoke a lot about the live in my last part, so if you guys are interested in watching that, I'll link it down below. But long story short, Sandra and Znuie's sisters, saiyr and emaza, were claiming that Znuie wasn't picking up the phone or wasn't returning any of their texts.
Znuie, FaceTime us if you're okay. You're really okay. Let me see your face, Znuie. Call me. Answer our call.
So when Znuie denied the fact that there was no communication between them and insisted on the fact that they've been in contact the whole time, that's when her family, mainly her mother, started twisting the story and saying that Jamez was the one texting them.
Mom was like, this isn't Znuie, this is Jamez texting this BS, da 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 da. So, and I'm just like, what?
And Jamez was telling her what to say, and that she looked like she wasn't taking care of herself. And I even said this in the past video. They said that her lips were dark. She's been smoking, and she was just like, my lips have been dark my whole life. Like, They were just blowing things out of proportion, and I think it was really embarrassing for both them and for Znuie mainly, because she didn't want to take this to social media. Apparently, after this entire situation on Instagram Live, Znuie was still ready to go back home. She wanted to address the situation in private with her family, and she even apologized about how she went about the situation, about lying about where she was, and how she was ready to move on. And this is where her family was exposed for that whole production that they put on Instagram Live. Znuie actually showed video footage of her trying to call her family and them not picking up. Znuie even showed some of the texts that Sandra had sent her, telling her that she's dead to the family, that she better not come home, that when James starts hitting her, she better take the hit, etc., etc. Which, of course, doesn't come off as the most supportive thing her mom could do for her at the moment. But in regards to the abuse that Sandra was referring to, she herself was in an abusive relationship before, and so she felt like she could recognize the red flags when it came to James. And this is why she didn't want Znuie hanging out with James in the first place. And I think this is a completely normal and natural reaction for a mother to have, especially one that's been through an abusive relationship themselves. But personally, I don't think that justifies how she went about it at all. So Znuie was planning on coming back home up until Sandra took her money out of her bank account. Her mom and her sister made a video packing up her stuff from her room and even gave her room to their youngest sister, Araya. Now, they say that it was Znuie's choice not to come home, but they were actually making that decision for her, because they inherently are kicking her out. And as a result, Znuie moved in with James. Now, this leads us to the topic of today's video. I know that was a very long way to give context, but I feel like this is a really complicated situation, and I want to be clear on all of the aspects of the situation. So as soon as the situation with Znuie's family started to die down on social media, she started to go on Instagram Live again, and at that point, it was mainly with James since she was living with him. And they seemed really happy together, which confused me personally, and I think it confused a lot of people, because Sandra and her family seemed so sure about the fact that, James was abusing her and that she wouldn't be happy with him because he would treat her terribly. But of course, abuse is not always an obvious thing to spot. At some point, Znuie revealed that she had been trying to get back in contact with her family, but they had blocked her off of all social media, and they would even ignore her messages. A couple months after the situation, fans started noticing that Znuie had archived all of her Instagram posts, and that her and James were no longer following each other on Instagram. Znuie ended up posting a note that had resembled a suicide note. I'll add it here. But after she posted that, she ended up deactivating her Instagram. And of course, that was a very scary situation for the fans, because it actually seemed like she would do something to harm herself from that note. And for the rest of 2018, Znuie would continue to post indirects and sad quotes onto her Instagram and her other social media, clearly insinuating that she was on bad terms with someone. And it was very obvious that that person was James, because that's who she was with at the time. And apparently, James would frequently block Znuie off of social media. She would take to social media to speak about it. They would be fine after a while, and she would pretend like nothing happened. And that was a recurring pattern. The worst part is that Znuie had just come out of that situation with her family. She was on bad terms with her best friend China, and so she was led to believe that James was the only person there for her. And this led Znuie into believing that he was the only person that cared for her and that he actually wanted to be with her. And so James ended up taking advantage of her vulnerability at the time. In August of 2018, Znuie and James were living in a hotel room together in Vegas, and things started getting worse for Znuie, because the vicious cycle of her breaking down on social media and then pretending like nothing happened and actually claiming that she wanted to fix her life was way more frequent. Now, personally, I remember this period quite vividly, especially her presence or lack thereof on YouTube. At that point in time, Znuie would barely post on her channel, and when she did, it would just be promo videos or hair videos, and fans got really annoyed at that because it felt like she wasn't taking YouTube seriously, or as seriously as she was. But looking at it in hindsight, her mom literally took out all her money from her bank account, and of course she needed a way to make that money back. You could tell that Znuie was really going through it at the time, not only because of the breakdowns that she was having on social media, but because of how sad she looked in the videos that she was posting at the time. But she's since deleted those videos off of her channel. After Znuie posted a particular YouTube video on her channel, her fans became really concerned for her well-being because she looked like she lost a lot of weight. And of course, that's no surprise because she had just gone through a really tough situation by moving out or being kicked out by her family and not even being in contact with them anymore, being humiliated on social media, and being in a toxic relationship with James. And the sad part is about the situation is that James continues to manipulate Znuie into believing that this is a normal, aspect of relationships and that all couples go through this. And this can be seen in the fact that she denies anything that happened, even after speaking about it clearly onto her social media in the midst of the situation. So she'll talk about what James has done, and then when they're on good terms, she just denies it. I'm going to add a clip of one of Znuie's many breakdowns that she's had on social media.
The thing I done was so fucking stupid, and I'm really fucking upset because I've done everything for this nigga. I went broke for this nigga. Everything.
So in the video, Znuie sounds really hurt, and of course that's understandable because she's just gone through that situation with her family, and now she's in a toxic relationship with James. She even says that she's been doing everything for him and he continues to hurt her. And the worst part is that he happens, or in her eyes, he's the only person there for her at the time. So towards the end of September of that year, Znuie flew back to LA for the first time since her falling out with her family. So the reason why Znuie went back to LA was to work with a producer that she had worked with previously when she was part of Ceraadi, and she really wanted to work with him because she felt like they were putting out their best music when they were working with him. So she was really interested in working with this producer to the point that she would get her followers to tag him under her posts just to get his attention. And the fact that she was so interested in working with this producer is very important for later. So it was later revealed by one of the fan pages that James had gotten really mad at Znuie for planning to go to LA. So at that point, it wasn't clear whether she would go ahead with the plan since everyone knew how much of a hold James had on Znuie. Unfortunately, that post was on the fan page's story, so I can't add it here. Honestly, I can't say I'm surprised about the outcome of the situation because, as I said multiple times, Znuie was being manipulated by James, and so she would do anything for him. But Znuie never ended up working with the producer, and she actually just ended up making a visit to LA with James. Znuie actually posted that she was at a Drake concert with James at the time, and she informed the fan pages that they were back on good terms and so that they shouldn't send him hate. Mind you, at that point, Znuie was still claiming that James was nothing but her best friend. And if that was the case, why would your best friend get mad at you for following your dream? It's giving me weird. It's giving me controlling. And of course, Znuie would always give in to what James wanted from her because she really needed someone to stick by her at the time, and it seemed as though he was the only person. And I'll keep saying this, when you're in a toxic and abusive relationship, it's hard to see clearly. So while the fans were getting frustrated with Znuie for staying with this guy, even though she would constantly have breakdowns on social media and saying that she was completely done with him, she would still go back to him. And I don't blame her. I don't think anyone should blame her because being in that situation, you don't really see the situation for what it actually is. James was essentially brainwashing her into believing that he was the only person there for her and that no one else would be there for her, so she should do what he asks her to do. After the breakdown that Znuie had in the car, she was very inactive on her social media, but she would post here and there. But this time was really concerning for the fans because the holidays were coming up, and of course James would spend it with his family, but Znuie couldn't contact her family since they were still ignoring her at the time. Znuie's fans even tried to spam her sisters and her mother, telling them to check on her, and they would either react by, turning off their comments or completely ignoring them. And I think that says a lot about Sandra and how she's making her daughters react to the situation. A day after Christmas, Znuie posted the following message on her Instagram, and she followed up this message with a few tweets. But what isn't understandable to me is that she couldn't rely on her best friend at the time. And of course I say that sarcastically because we know that James was a big reason as to why Znuie's mental condition seems to be worsening at this point. All he cared about was keeping her in a vulnerable situation so that he could take advantage of it. As a matter of fact, James and Znuie didn't even spend Christmas together. And, you know, that says a lot about their alleged best friend relationship, because, you know, if I had a best friend and they didn't have any family to spend Christmas with, the least I would do is invite them over. But James didn't do that, and that all points to the fact that he wasn't actually her best friend. On the day that Znuie had her breakdown on Instagram and Twitter, she was asking her fans to spam James' Instagram page to unblock Znuie. So not only did James leave Znuie alone on Christmas Day, he had her blocked. She even put out his phone number so that people could spam him. So Znuie ended up deactivating her Instagram and wasn't active on any other social media until after New Year's. On New Year's, James ended up posting the following picture onto his Instagram story with the caption 2K18 with a laughing face. By posting that picture, James was making fun of Znuie and the situation that she had with her family. It shows how disrespectful he is. It shows how he doesn't care about her, and he takes the situation, which actually affected Znuie, lightly. Znuie then ended up posting that she had a new attitude this year, and that if someone or something wasn't serving her, she would get rid of them.
New year, new fucking attitude, okay? I'm learning how to not give a fuck. Like, I gave too much fucks last year, and guess what? That was my downfall. So I don't give a fuck. If you don't benefit me, then get the fuck out.
And you would think that James would be one of those things, but sadly that wasn't the case. So the day after, one of James' baby mothers, her name is Kylie, she felt as though Znuie was throwing shade at her, and so she called her out on it, and she ended up posting pictures of James and their son just to rub it in Znuie's face, because she knew how much she cared about James. She then ended up exposing Znuie for lying about, you know, her status with James. She exposed her for claiming that they were nothing but friends, and the fact that she actually cared about James as more than a friend. Kylie went on to say that James would never lie to her, and so if James saw Znuie as more than a friend, he would have told her. So she was basically saying that Znuie was stupid to believe that James wanted to be with her. She even says that James will never be done with his relationship with Kylie, and that they only broke up recently and have been working on their relationship ever since. Kylie then goes on to say that James was actually with her on Christmas Day, and that they were doing everything that people in a relationship do. She ended up posting screenshots of the text between her and Znuie, where Znuie actually apologizes for seeming like she was interfering in her relationship with James and kind of their whole family situation, that she hopes that they can work on their family and everything can be normal. And she knew about the fact that, you know, they were together on Christmas Day. She even ends up saying that she has nowhere to go. She ends the message by saying that she would remove herself from the situation, i.e. she would, you know, stop dealing with James out of respect for Kylie and her son. Znuie clarified that she walked into this situation with James having no idea that he was still pursuing a relationship with Kylie, and that she was being lied to the whole time and being manipulated, and that really took a toll on her mental health and even her will to live. I really felt for Znuie after reading those messages, because, you know, it explains a lot about, you know, the extent that James went to manipulate her and just to take advantage of her vulnerable situation. Like, he was actually making Znuie believe that they were, like, in a relationship, but he was also pursuing a relationship with his baby mother. And now both the girls are fighting because of what he's doing. You get what I mean? Like, this isn't a good situation to be in. And Kylie posted those messages calling Znuie a joke. Kylie went on to making fun of Znuie for supporting James financially. She was paying for his Ubers, his Netflix, his hotel rooms, Apple Music, diapers, and James would actually spend a lot of money on Kylie on the other hand. He would pay for her to get her nails done, he would pay for her clothes. She even said that he spent $50K on her in 2017 alone. Basically saying that Znuie doesn't compare to Kylie in James' eyes. She was basically taunting Znuie by posting pictures of her and James onto her story, showing the fact that James even posts Kylie on his page, just to show that he claims Kylie and he doesn't claim Znuie. So we can clearly see here that Znuie wasn't merely best friends with James, she was actually madly in love with him. And I think that came from the fact that she really needed someone to rely on after that situation with her family, and James seemed to be the only person there. And, you know, like, she also has daddy issues, which she's admitted to in the past because of her dad not being present in her life. James, being the manipulative person that he is, took advantage of this vulnerable situation that Znuie was in for his own gain and led Znuie to believe that he actually had feelings for her, knowing that he was still involved with Kylie. And because of Znuie's vulnerable state, she agreed to lie about her situation with James and claiming that they were just best friends, just so that he could be there for her. Now, remember when I said that Znuie was doing all those promo videos and those hair videos because she had no money? And that is true, she had no money, but she was spending all that money on James, which explains the fact that she had nowhere to stay after he abandoned her on Christmas. Znuie really did everything for James to the point that she would actually babysit his eldest son at times. And again, Znuie took to Instagram to announce the fact that she was done with the bullshit and that she wasn't putting up with any of it anymore. And, you know, at this point we think that she's trying to convince herself and not anyone else, because we can see it from the outside and it's just very predictable that she's going to go back to him. In February, Ceraadi, which consisted of Saiyr and Emaza at the time, had their first official interview.
What's that like?
Yeah, it was heartbreaking. Like, we have a younger brother and a baby sister, and it affected them a lot because they grew up with just everyone here. Like, we've never been separated.
It was real tight.
Yeah. And so for that to happen, it's like you're used to someone being in your life and you're used to that person, you know, showing that good side, and then
Stop it! I can feel you.
What's about to happen?
You know,
upsetting?
Yes, we're very upsetting.
We've been through a lot as a family, and the only parent we have is our mom. So there's a lot of crazy stuff that happened, and so we just think like we was gonna break up,
and then never heard from her again. Disappeared.
Disappeared?
So when we took it to social media, because it wasn't like her, it wasn't like her.
because we took it to police first, and
Yeah.
they said it sounds like sex
Wow.
trafficking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It got that.
It was really
Jeez.
deep. It was really real. Like, everything was real.
They didn't go into too much detail, but they got really emotional talking about it and spoke about how hard it was and how hard it was for their younger siblings to deal with. And I completely believe that. I don't think that they're the villains in the situation. I think Sandra was the one that conducted this whole thing. And you know what? They had to put up with it because they lived with her. She practically kicked their sister out, saying that she was dead to the family. And she was like making these decisions on behalf of everyone. She was making the decision on behalf of Znuie, saying that she decided to get kicked out, where she was in fact the person that kicked her out. And she made the decision on behalf of the rest of their family to like not be in contact with her anymore. Between March and April of that year, Kylie and James were posting together, and they obviously were still together like nothing happened. Znuie and James were still on bad terms since they weren't following each other on social media at that point. But the gag is, Znuie was still babysitting his eldest son. You know what? Like, James is a master manipulator. Like, even when they're on bad terms, she's willing to do anything for this man. At the same time that James was spending a lot of time with Kylie, Znuie took to social media to shade him. She was saying things like she needed some time alone, that loving her in private and playing her in public is how you get cut off, and some other tweets that I'll add here. At the end of April, Znuie announced that she had lost all passion for all the things that she used to love to do before, like, you know, social media, YouTube, music, etc., etc., and that she would be deactivating her social media to find herself again. She expressed that she'd been feeling sad and depressed at the time, and that the only person there for her was her best friend China, which kind of pointed to the fact that they had rekindled their friendship. I personally think that Znuie needs someone to lean on and someone to be there for her rather than to be with James in particular. Znuie ended up wishing her mother a happy Mother's Day on Instagram and revealed the fact that they were on speaking terms again. But one particular point that Znuie mentioned is that their conversations weren't the same anymore because Sandra would barely put in any effort, which is fucking crazy to me because, like, how are you not over the situation? It's been a year now. And, you know, your daughter's being more mature than you. She's putting her feelings aside and she wants to, you know, speak to you. How is she not over it? That's just what I want to know. Znuie got a comment on her post telling her that if she loves her mom, she should go see her. And Znuie responded saying that she tried to go see them, but her mom told her that they had moved. Bro, that's such a shitty excuse. Like, you obviously don't want to see her. I don't get it. Like, I don't get this mom. She's just weird. A few days later, Znuie posted a screenshot of her little brother Rasai's spam page, calling her and anyone that followed her dumb sluts and hoes. And Znuie expressed how much that hurt her feelings because it's been over a year since the situation had passed. And, you know, she was ready to move on. She was she had already apologized to her family, and they obviously still had hard feelings towards her. So again, I'll be adding the trigger warning here because, you know, this part really revolves around physical abuse and suicidal thoughts and depression. At some point, Znuie posted the following tweet on her Twitter saying that nobody who loves you would ever put their hands on you. And she was constantly posting these reminders onto her social media saying that she was single and that she wasn't involved with anyone. And I think the main point of her saying this is to bring it to James' attention and to bother him. But of course, he doesn't care about her, so it wouldn't bother him. She even posted a screenshot of a chat conversation that she had with someone, but she didn't even show who the person was. That person told her to get a job, and she captioned that post by saying, you know, you do everything for someone, and this is the thanks that you get. And we all know that the person that she does everything for is James, so this is very obvious that, you know, James was the person that told her to get a job. And during this time, Znuie wasn't speaking to James, and he was posting public apologies on his page to Znuie, asking his followers to tell her to forgive him and to call him. And, you know, I think this is, like, I definitely don't think that this is genuine. I hope no one thinks that this is genuine. Like, he just needs something from her. And going back to the tweet that Znuie had posted about someone who loves you not putting their hands on you, she was definitely talking about James and kind of like the fact that she would leave him when he would hurt her and that he would publicly ask for her back. And we know, like I said, this isn't genuine. This is just for his mere advantage. At the end of July 2019, Znuie had yet another breakdown on social media saying that she just doesn't care about anything, that she had lost all the will to live. And this carried out until August 2019 because she was sick of everything going wrong in her life. She even took to her Instagram story to ask her followers whether therapy worked because she was considering it at that point. She even tweeted that she was considering moving back to LA to come forward with her abuse story. So the day that Znuie moved back to LA, I don't think she was expecting to reunite with her family, especially because her and her mom wouldn't talk that much. But I will say that Znuie was really excited to go back to LA in general, and she's expressed multiple times how happy she was to be going back. And at the same time, she was opening up about the abuse that she had endured in her relationship. She even spoke about how that played a big part in her depression and her suicidal thoughts, and that she was done with all the abuse. Again, we can sort of start to see the beginning of this pattern of Znuie claiming that she was done with something, but I think fans started to believe her and they got their hopes up because she was going to LA alone this time. During Znuie's time in LA, she actually managed to meet up with her family, and they posted the following video on the Ceraadi page. Of course, the fans were surprised to see them together because there was no sign of them, you know, being in contact before, other than the infrequent messages between Znuie and Sandra. But that didn't last long because a short while later, Emaza and Znuie were no longer following each other, and that video was taken down from the Ceraadi page. Both Sandra and Znuie opened up about what happened during the reunion, but they both gave a little bit of a different version of the story. They both said that they had tried to speak about the initial situation, i.e., you know, Znuie leaving. Znuie said that her mom was still hung up on the situation and she was really emotional talking about it, and Emaza would keep trying to chime in, which eventually made the situation worse and led Znuie to getting kicked out another time by her mom. Sandra's side of the story was a little bit different than Znuie's. I won't say a little bit, it was a lot different than Znuie's. But she had come forward to the fan pages and actually, you know, said her account of the situation. Sandra said that Znuie came forward about the abuse that she had endured with James and even showed her some of the pictures of the bruises and marks and scratches that James had left on her. And she said that she contemplated pressing charges, but she couldn't because she was still in love with him. Znuie even opened up about James' controlling nature and the fact that he would control her accounts and he would take all the money from her partnerships. And the fact that he left her stranded a few days before she left Vegas with $40 to the point that she couldn't even afford to eat. Once her family was aware of the severity of the situation, they offered Znuie help. Sandra offered Znuie, you know, a new phone, a new apartment, a car, a new manager to help her with her career, some money. And she even spoke to, you know, some of the brands that Znuie was working with and explained the situation just so that Znuie could claim her money from them. According to Sandra, Znuie declined the manager and the apartment but accepted everything else. At some point, Znuie had told her family that she was staying with China for a few days, but in reality, she was going to see James. When her mom asked her what she was doing in Vegas, Znuie said that she was just getting her hair done. This is where Sandra clarified that it wasn't a case of them ignoring Znuie. They would offer her help in private, but she would deny that she needed any help. I personally wouldn't say that's the justification for Sandra's behavior at all. Like, the fact that she would rather turn off her comments or ignore, the speculations rather than actually explain the situation as she did to the fan pages is very, very questionable. But even after, Znuie left a second time, Saiyr and Sandra were still in contact with her. And I think this is because now they're aware of the severity of the situation, so they want to at least provide Znuie with that little bit of support, even if she doesn't want to be with them. In October of that year, so when Znuie left LA, she opened up more and more about the abuse she had endured in her relationship with James. So she ended up posting pictures of the cuts and bruises that James had left on her, but of course I won't be adding these pictures to this video for obvious reasons. But she ended up deleting the photos shortly after. She captioned the photos by saying her mother had told her this would happen, that this person manipulated her into believing that they left her, and that he manipulated her into believing that it was her fault. While Znuie never name-dropped who her abuser was, it was obviously James, because her family had warned her about James before. He manipulated her into believing that he cared about her, and of course, toxicity and the manipulation of making the victim believe that it was their fault comes with an abusive relationship. Emaza even confirmed this speculation after one of the blogs had posted the pictures that Znuie posted, and she said that James has done this to multiple women before and that he needs to be stopped. And the fact that they reunited was just an attempt by them to get her away from him. After Emaza spoke out about this issue, James went on Instagram Live and claimed that Emaza was lying and that she was making up these rumors just because she didn't like him, and that Znuie has had multiple boyfriends and he wasn't the one that abused her and he had no idea who her abuser was. James went on to deflect from the main issue by saying that he had risked his relationship with Kylie and his son for Znuie, and that this actually prevented him from seeing his son for multiple months. I think this is disgusting behavior. He's actually making the situation about him and deflecting from the main issue, and I think this is a big piece of evidence that it was him who abused Znuie, because if your best friend is being abused, how do you not know who it is? And also, why are you making it about yourself? You get what I mean? He goes on to say that he's been honest with Znuie multiple times about him not wanting to be with her, but of course, that's a lie because we know that he's been leading her on. So this situation ended up with Znuie regretting putting her story out at all, which I can understand because people are chiming in and, twisting it every which way, as if it's not her story to tell. She unfortunately ended up saying that she would never speak on this again, and whoever had her pictures should delete them, which is very unfortunate because, she had the courage to speak out at first, but just the fact that people were twisting it, or possibly the fact that she was scared of James retaliating, is what made her regret putting it out in the first place. But Znuie went on to say that James wasn't her abuser and that they were accusing the wrong person, and that her purpose was to just bring awareness to the idea and the issue of domestic violence. Of course, since it was super obvious from the way that Znuie addressed the situation, as well as Emaza's confirmation of those allegations, James is most likely the person that abused her. And I'm personally not surprised that she defended James even after everything that he's done for her, because he's manipulated her time and time again. So even if she did feel the courage to come out with her story at first, she must have felt fear of retaliation from James, or possibly, being overwhelmed by a lot of people kind of commenting on this situation, which is what led her to delete her post and saying that she would never speak about it again. So I had to refilm this outro because my lips look chapped in my last one. So yeah, I'm here. I just want to say this is where my commentary will leave off for now, but in the next part I'll be talking more about Znuie and James' relationship. Like the events go on, I just can't put them all in one video, I'm sorry. Anyway, that's it. I just wanted to remind you guys to please subscribe to my channel, turn on post notifications if you want to be notified about part 3. What else? Oh, and follow all my socials, they'll be linked down below.